All right. Good evening, everybody. This is Martin. We're going to get started in just just a minute here, and getting a couple of quick things ironed out. But as you are joining in, I just want to welcome everybody and thank you for being on here. And hopefully, we are streaming live on Instagram. We should be. We should be. We should be. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Martin Ruof, and I just really want to welcome you to the Martin Ruof podcast. And for those of you that that may not know me, again, my name is Martin Ruof, and I'll kind of share a little bit about my background. I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, and the but basically an entrepreneur for 20 years. I worked in the restaurant industry for 20 years and then became an entrepreneur and have been an entrepreneur, as I said. Actually, it's a little over 20 years. And I've been very, very fortunate to have pretty significant degree of success, as an entrepreneur, an eight-figure earner, and I'm sharing that for a reason. I really don't particularly care to talk about money that I've made and things like that, but I'm going to do so for a very specific reason tonight. And the reason that I'm doing this podcast is because I've had many friends actually talk to me over the last several years and like, man, you've really got to do a podcast. You really ought to do a podcast. And it was something that I avoided intensely for quite some time. And I finally gave into I just succumbed to it. And I had a lot of trepidation about it for various reasons. Actually, some things that I'll get into tonight. But ultimately, the purpose of doing this podcast is to help other people that have been going through a difficult time. And, it's really about helping people live the life that they truly desire to live. And I believe that just about everyone has a deep-seated dream, a deep-seated goal, a deep-seated vision for their life. It's an inner knowingness that they believe they can do X. They believe they were put on this earth to do X, to do something specific. And a lot of people either don't know what that is, or they may be afraid to admit what it is, or they just don't believe that they can achieve it. But I think everybody really has a dream. And so this podcast is about helping people realize their dreams. And ultimately, what that process of realizing a dream, what it ultimately leads to is freedom, and freedom on so many different levels. And I even say it moves all the way beyond freedom into liberty and like liberation, true liberation of self. And so that's what this podcast is about. Now, tonight I'm going to specifically really talk about one subject in particular. And that subject tonight is grief. And I'm going to talk about grief because it's something that, again, I see a lot of people experiencing. People that I know, some good friends are in the process of grieving. I have some friends that have moved out of grief recently. And for my own self, I went through a really intense grieving period that lasted about 4 years. Now, what's interesting about grief is that typically they say grief lasts anywhere from six months to 2 years and sometimes longer. And I also think that there's a little bit of a stigma, I think, attached around grief. And I'm one of those guys that I just have to be real. Okay. I just cannot live my life effectively and efficiently and productively bullshitting people. I just don't do it well. And I don't like being bullshitted. I don't like bullshitting other people. And in the process of living, I just think the process of living is inherently challenging. There's a great book by M. Scott Peck. It was written a long time ago. I think in the 70s, I think it was written. But M. Scott Peck wrote a book called um, oh God, The Road Less Traveled. I almost forgot what it was. The Road Less Traveled. And the very first line of the book is incredible. The first line of the book is, life is hard. The second line of the book is, the acceptance of that fact makes life easier. And I know there's people that are like, no, like, don't say life is hard. What you say, manifest. Life is easy. Life is great. Life is awesome. That's cool. Okay. Rock and roll. That's you. Good for you. That's just not my experience. Okay. I definitely believe that what we say manifests. I definitely believe that words have power. Absolutely. The inner dialogue has tremendous power. I believe that the universe, it doesn't really necessarily discern between, positive and negative, right? A positive statement and a negative statement. The universe is there to make manifest what we speak continually. Okay. I believe that. And I also believe that there's yin and yang, there's light and dark. So I believe that, yes, that life has its difficulties. It also has its extraordinary moments of bliss and ease and abundant prosperity. And absolutely. But just like the tide rolls in, the tide rolls out. And so I don't think that saying that life is difficult at times, the acceptance of that fact makes life easier. I think that acknowledging that actually is a good thing. And so, and so grief is something that I think people don't really want to talk about. I think that people think they shouldn't be grieving. And by the way, there's lots of different things that people can grieve. But first, let me just talk about the definition of grief and what grief really is. And before I say that, I just want to say that, like, on here, I just want to talk about, I'm just going to say it this way. I want to talk about real shit. I don't want to sit here and talk about, like, oh my God, life is so awesome and everything is great. And, I'm just not that dude. And the crap that we see on Instagram, everybody puts everything great on Instagram, and there's definitely people that will share the struggle and the challenges. And I'm so happy and grateful for the people that actually do that, because I think that that's what's actually real. It's not all glam and gloss, folks. Like, there's down times, there's darkness, and there's bitterness, and there's depression. And that's what makes the moments of sweetness and joy and prosperity and all of that, and light, that's what makes it so wonderful. So with that said, when you look at grief, I mean, kind of like the short sort of definition of grief, I would just say, is it's the anguish that's experienced after a significant loss. Okay. The anguish experienced after a significant loss. Now, a lot of people think, well, grief is comes from loss of a loved one. Well, sure. Absolutely. But there can be grief literally from moving, the grief of the ending of a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, the grief of loss of a pet. Literally, you can literally grieve the loss of this is going to sound silly, but like a car, something that you are attached to, that you've been attached to, or that you hold a deep affection towards, can trigger a sense of grief. Obviously, there's different levels of grief, and but there's also grief in the loss of an identity, okay, and the loss of a job. So for myself, okay, my story is that I worked in the restaurant industry for 20 years, and I got so sick and tired of what I was doing because I just knew that there was a greater life that I could be living. I didn't know what that life was going to be, but I knew that there was something more out there for me. I wanted to be able to make more money. I wanted to be able to have more fun. I wanted to be able to travel the world. I wanted to do these things that I kept seeing other people doing. Frankly, the people that I was waiting tables on, I was waiting tables on millionaires and billionaires and celebrities, and was like, it's just like, God, I was constantly looking at the lifestyle that I wanted. And to me, that was demotivating at first, but then it became very motivating because I recognized, well, if these people can do it, then I must be able to do it, because I recognized that I simply needed a different plan in order to accomplish a different goal that I had, to accomplish a different lifestyle. And so I share that because I became very, very successful doing something that was, as a business. I wound up traveling around the world. I was speaking in public, on major stadiums. I'm sorry, major stages, like big arenas, 15 to 25,000 people in stadiums and stuff like that. It was really extraordinary. And as I said, I was literally traveling around the world, helping people break free, helping people become entrepreneurs and really work on themselves to be the greatest, highest, best version of themselves so they could achieve certain financial goals and business goals. And I knew that um, in order to live the life that I wanted to live, I had to be willing to let go of the life that I was living. And understand what I just said there. In order to live a life that you really want, you've got to be willing to let go of the life that you currently have. Well, there can be a sense of grief in that. For me, there wasn't much grieving because I was moving into this new life very, very quickly, and it was the life that I wanted. But what happens when you move from the life that you want into a life you really don't want? Well, for me, when that happened, it happened really around the pandemic. The business that I was involved in, the field that it was in, the industry was effectively travel. And so the pandemic just decimated the travel industry. The company that I didn't own this company, but I was a pretty major stakeholder in the company. That company went bankrupt. And, that company, I made decisions to help that company succeed. And I literally put money into it. I allowed money that was owed to me to be deferred. And I wound up being owed, $750,000. And I was literally paying people's rent. I was paying for their cars. I was helping people that were devastated by the bankruptcy and the very sudden demise of this company. And so I became, you know, very focused on helping others, which I was always focused on that, but specifically around this company and saving this company. And it just failed. It just failed. And when it went away pretty damn quickly. And I went into a place of grief, but there are stages of grief. Okay. Now there's, depending upon what book you're reading, there's 7 stages, there's 4 stages, there's 5 stages. These are the stages that I recognize. Okay. The first stage of grief is shock. Okay. I was shocked when this thing ended because I had a sense that it was coming, but I was working so hard to not let it happen that when it ultimately did, I was just like stunned. Just like just stunned. Shock. That's the first phase of grief. And that can last however long it lasts. For me, it didn't last all that long because I went right into another phase. And that second phase of grief is denial. So I went into the denial phase pretty quickly because I was like the fix it guy. I was known around the world for what I was doing. And there was a lot of people that were looking up to me and looking to me for answers. And so I didn't have a lot of time, to sit in that shock phase. I had to get into another phase, and that was the denial phase. And the denial phase was kind of like self-preservation for me. And I got into fix it mode and like, okay, we're going to transition this and we're going to be able to go into here and we're going to do that. And this is going to help people. But I was in denial of the reality of what was actually happening, that I was actually owed $750,000, that I had friendships that had fallen apart and were falling apart. I was in denial that I was not being told the truth. I was in denial about multiple things. So I went from shock into denial, and then I went into anger. And anger is the next phase. Now, this phase can be very interesting. Again, it can be very motivating. It can be very debilitating. I did a talk, I think it was last week, about resentment and kind of the difference between anger and resentment. And I said that anger can be very motivating, and it really can. For me, the anger motivated me to, again, seek greater solution and to fix it. And what I wound up doing was focusing on everything outside myself, denying my own feelings. That second phase, denying my own feelings, not just the reality of the situation, but my inner feelings. And effectively, I got into this anger phase, and I was just like, we just got to go. We got to fix this. We got to go. We got to fix this. And that led to the next phase, which is pretty typical, which is bargaining. Okay. And if you're in a phase of grief right now, and you're like, you're in this bargaining phase, it's semi-similar to denial, but it's basically kind of where you go back in your mind and you try to change things in your mind. It's almost like going back in time and changing what actually occurred, to create a different reality. It's a weird phase. And I was bargaining with the truth. I was bargaining with the truth. I was bargaining with reality to create a different reality. And this is when I really started losing myself. And for people that are in grief, and what I'm talking about, the grief tonight, it's about the loss of identity that was triggered by the loss of a career, a 20-year career that profoundly changed my life. Okay. That next phase was depression. And this is the one that I sat in for years, 3 years, pretty much 3 years for sure. You know what? I won't say that. 2 years for sure. Okay. I was in the depression phase of grief for deeply, darkly, deeply for a solid year to 18 months. And this depression phase, you'll hear a lot of people that are in the grieving process. They'll say that this is the worst, the most difficult phase, the phase that people go through the longest because it's debilitating. And I'm going to talk about what you do, what not to do with grief. But certainly depression is where we can slip into the really debilitating behaviors and activities that trigger deeper depression and keep us in a sense of grief. And then the last phase of grief is acceptance. And this is when we begin to spiral out, move out of. We spiral downward, and then we begin to spiral upward and out of grief. And acceptance is the key. There's this great saying from a great book, and it is, acceptance is the key to all my problems. Okay. And I believe that acceptance really is the key to all my problems, because once I can accept it, and then I'm living in reality, then I can actually do something about it. And, acceptance is, and I'll be very candid, acceptance is a phase that I'm really in now. I'm in the acceptance of what happened. I'm in the acceptance of the aftermath of what took place of the loss of myself, of the loss of a career, of the loss of friendships, of the loss of tremendous amount of money, millions of dollars, of the loss of creativity, of so much loss. But the acceptance of that is ultimately brings me peace. It doesn't necessarily mean it makes it feel good, but it's at least brings me peace and clarity and awareness and strength. And so for me, again, I went through a grieving period that lasted 4 years. And it was the grief that was triggered by the loss of a career, and a career that I built my identity around. And so ultimately, what I was grieving was not so much, it was almost like a dual grief. Yes, it was the grief of the loss of a career, but it was really the loss of an identity. And I think for me, that's why it was so difficult to get out of, because I had built relationships around this identity that I had, this identity of being a successful guy and, coming from not a zero to hero, but pretty damn close, you know, this sort of, just this really incredible story, moving from being a waiter, living in a one-room apartment, to earning millions of dollars and moving into a home in the Hollywood Hills that used to be owned by a very famous celebrity. I mean, a global, international superstar, and traveling around the world and all this stuff. And it was like, I recognized that for me, the identity around the money was a really fake identity, because it wasn't built on anything that actually is truly meaningful and permanent. And I say permanent because when we die, all our stuff, we don't take it with us, right? The Egyptians believed, you bury yourself with all your stuff, but that's cool. They believe you have it in your afterlife, but the ancient Egyptians, but I don't believe that. What I have that lasts is the legacy. And the legacy is not just financial wealth, which I can certainly pass that on. Yes, to heirs and to family and whatnot. But ultimately, what I really want to leave behind as a legacy is my relationships, the impact that I have on my son, on our son, with my wife, with my family, with my friends, with the world, certainly my immediate community. That's true legacy. I wonder about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs left billions, I believe, read billions to his daughter. That's cool, but he didn't leave billions to us. But his legacy was literally this. And his legacy were the things that he said, and the impact that he made in like a commencement speech that I've listened to dozens and dozens of times. That to me is a true legacy, is the impact that you leave on the world. And so for me, grieving the loss of identity, the loss of a sense of who I was incredibly difficult. And yet it's also accepting that has allowed me to move on and become who I'm ultimately meant to be. So listen, if you're going through grief right now and you're in one of those phases, whether it's shock, whether it's denial, whether it's anger, whether it's the bargaining phase or the depression phase or the acceptance phase, or maybe you've moved on and you used to grieve something, but now you're no longer in that place of grief, then that's awesome. It's wonderful. But what do you have now that you moved on from it? Wisdom. You have wisdom. And isn't that a beautiful thing? A friend of mine just said, one of my business partners, we were talking earlier about something that was, just some challenges, and he said to me, he just said, everything we do, everything we're doing has meaning. And, I just said to him, I'm like, that I'm saving that because that's so true. Everything we do has meaning. Your grief has meaning. The challenge is when you're in the phase of grief, in the various phases of grief, it's really challenging and difficult at times to understand that there's freaking meaning to this mess. But as the saying goes, there is no message without a mess. My friend Johnny says, my mess became my message. And I just pass that along to you because grief takes people out. It's not just depression. It's like grief takes people out. Grayson Murray, I believe the golfer, PGA Tour golfer, who on the outside you could think, man, this guy's earned over $9 million in career winnings, and he's on TV, he's playing golf, he's doing the thing that he loves, and it's so easy to idolize other people and to look at other people and just assume they have this amazing life. But he struggled. He was in anguish, and he took his own life just a few days ago. And it rocked the golf world. It rocked the world. I didn't even know the guy, but it made my heart so sad for him and for his family. And I just wonder that at some point, when someone chooses to throw in the towel of life, is it that they just found there was no meaning to their mess? And I'm not trying to create a big controversy here because, look, I mean, I've been in a place where I had suicidal thoughts. It's true, I did. And what kept me going was my son and my wife and a couple of really good friends. And if you're watching, I mean, you know who you are. And I never got to a point where I was like actively right about to do something, but damn, I got dark. So grief is real. And these phases of grief are real. And these phases of grief, they have an impact on our bodies. Big time. Sleep problems like sleep deprivation, but really just problems staying asleep. Chest pains, joint pain, gastrointestinal issues. I mean, wow, it's amazing. So when the body is then affected, and it's not just the mind, but it's the body, and then the spirit is impacted, shit is hard, man. It's difficult. So how do we process this? What do we do with our grief? How do we use it so that we are in grief, but not we're in our grief, but not of it. Does that make sense? We're in our grief, but we're not of it. And I guess I would say this. I think that phase to get to, pardon me if you can hear my son crying in the background. So if we can get to a place where that phase where we're in acceptance and we can just accept what has occurred, the loss that has occurred, where we are on our way. And that is a difficult place to get to, but just know that you've got to go through the various phases and that what you're going through is normal. It's normal. And that it's best not to try to deny, which is one of the phases. It's best not to try to deny what we're feeling, but instead just acknowledge it. And here are some things that helped me. And I pass these on to you. And I could say, look, well, there's 3 things, or there's 4 things, or there's 5 things. You know what? There's as many things as you freaking need to move through your grief. So I'm not going to be like, well, there's 4 things to do to get out of your grief. 1, there's as many as it takes. For me, the acceptance was key. But in order to get to the acceptance, I had to communicate. The worst thing for grief, in my opinion, isolation. Isolation is bad freaking news. So, if you are grieving now and your tendency will want to make you isolate, or your tendency is to isolate, please reach out. Reach out. Part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is to build a community so that you know you're not alone. And so that whatever it is you're going through, you can go through it with someone else, with a group of people. I had very, very close friends that I could reach out to, people that I trusted, my friend Kim, my friend Michael, my friend John, my friend Darren. I had my friend Hadiato. I had some people that were extremely close to me that I let in. Now listen to me. That takes courage. It takes courage because your grief might tell you, or whatever phase you're in might tell you, you're the only one going through it. Especially if you're in the depression phase, you're the only one going through it. If you're in the anger, and the reality is you're not. You're not. There's millions of people that are depressed around the world. Mental health is a major issue. We know this. It's on the forefront of the news and social media, sports world, the Hollywood. It's all over the place. Mental health is paramount. Okay. If you're in the anger phase, here's what can happen. You can talk to people and they will tell you, stop, you're so angry. You get judgment from other people. Those people that judge you are not your damn friends. Move away from those people. Do it. Move away. I had people tell me, stop being so angry. They were judging me for being angry. Well, I was in freaking denial. I lost an extraordinary amount of money. I had lost friends. I was in the process of losing friends. I lost belief systems. My whole construct of certain things was fundamentally changed. Yeah, I was pissed off. I didn't need somebody to tell me, don't be so angry. God, you're really it's really nasty when you're angry. Instead, find the people that can listen to you and hear your anger and say to you, I hear you. I hear you, brother. I hear you, my friend. I hear you and I feel you. And you know what? You got a right to be angry. It's okay to be angry. And this is a safe place to talk about it. Because anger that goes unprocessed is incredibly destructive. So, acceptance. Feel what you are feeling. Be in it, but not of it. You are not your grief. You are not your anger. You are not your denial. You are not your shock. You are not your bargaining. You're none of those. Those are feelings that you're having. They are thoughts that will come and go. So, being around people, communicating, be very mindful of who you let in. My advice is don't put this shit on social media. Don't do it, because there's a bunch of idiots out there that think that they have a right to comment on and judge whatever it is you're going through. And these are people that are wholly unqualified to offer their opinion of your personal life and your personal experience. Please don't put it out on social media. There's a way to do things. Okay. I just don't think putting it all out on social media for the world to see, for the negative, nasty people. Now, listen, yes, sometimes it's okay, I think, to be, of course, it's good to be real on social media, but just be mindful that if you share too broadly, you open yourself up to the opinions of others who are unqualified to freaking share it. That's all I'm saying. Okay. The next thing, the communication, surrounding yourself with good friends, not isolating. The next things that I would say It's to be able to move into a place of forgiveness. This I talked about in the third episode. Okay. The last episode I did, I talked about forgiveness. Forgiveness and acceptance are massive. Forgiveness, I'm not going to go into a big talk about it because I did it last week. Go listen to the last episode, episode 3, I believe it was. But forgiveness is key. And when I talk about acceptance, I mean ownership. There's a great book called um good Lord. It's by Jocko Willink. It's not called ownership, but I'm totally blanking on. I think I got the book. I got the book around here somewhere, but it's about ownership. It's about owning what's going on in your life, owning it all. It's called Extreme Ownership. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL. If you've never read the book, highly recommend it. Okay. But what that does is it puts you in a place of power. It puts you in a place of reality and ownership. It gives you your power back. And from a place of acceptance and ownership, you can then move to forgiveness. And forgiveness is key. And you might be like, well, I'm grieving the loss of something, or maybe I'm grieving the loss of someone. Why do I need to forgive? I don't know. Why do you need to forgive? Is there someone you need to forgive? Are you angry at someone for leaving too soon? Are you angry at someone for taking someone you loved? Are you angry at someone? For me, I was angry at the people that destroyed the company and took the money that I was owed and lied to me and used me. Now, listen carefully. One of the things that can happen is that you go into victim mode. I went into victim mode. Is it true that money was effectively stolen from me? Yes, it is true. Is it true also that I allowed it to happen? Yes, it is true. So I had to accept that I played a part in what happened. I played a part. What part do you play in whatever it is that you're grieving? What part do you play? Could could the part you're playing be you holding on to it? Could it be that you're choosing to hold on to it? Is that becoming part of the identity? So for me, I had to accept that I played a major part in this. And then I got real angry at myself. And I had to forgive myself. And so again, last week, I talked about forgiveness as well. As I said, I talk a lot about it, but that's a big one. And the forgiveness is freedom. It truly is real freedom. So I'll recap it with this. It's acceptance. It's making sure you're not isolating and you're communicating with a core group of people. And if you're getting judged, move away from those people. And it's truly taking ownership of what occurred and remembering to be in it, but not of it. Are there other things you can do to move on from grieving? Oh, absolutely. But what happens is that ultimately you wind up re-entering the world. And maybe you re-enter the world differently. You are changed. Good. Welcome to your new self. I thoroughly believe that being willing to accept what happened and being willing to let go of who you were in order to embrace who you're meant to become, that's key. It's paramount. But you've got to be willing to feel the feelings. And for a lot of people like myself, that's not really what I wanted to do. I didn't want to feel them. I wanted to avoid them. Drinking, smoking tons of cigars, just generally avoiding my life, my feelings, my reality, spending, um, watching TV, drinking way too much sugar, eating way too much food. I gained like 50 pounds for real, man. Or not 50, 40 pounds. I'm not giving up those 10 pounds. No, no, but for real. I mean, it's anesthetizing. My friend Darren says that people are addicted to distraction. Of course, they're addicted to distraction, to avoiding their feelings because it hurts. It doesn't feel good. And so we avoid. But you either pay now so you can play later, or you play now and you pay later. You decide. Life is hard, but the acceptance of that fact makes life inherently easier. So, grief. So, I don't know if you're grieving now, my heart is with you. My thoughts are with you. I pray for you. I feel for you. And hey, reach out to me if you like. Just know I'm a guy you can talk to. Reach out to me, on Instagram, DM me, just at Martin Ruof, and reach out to me, because the worst thing is to isolate. The worst thing is to think you're alone. The worst thing is to not communicate. All those keep you stuck in a cycle, in one of the various cycles of grief that can last for 3 to 4 years, or you can move through it much, much, much faster. And when you move through your grief, again, you move through it and you become anew, like a snake that shed its skin. And then you have wisdom that you can offer the world. And as the saying goes, every wisdom has its price, but you have wisdom that you can then offer the world. And can be of greater service to the world. Because ultimately, it's not about sharing loss. It's about sharing the wisdom that is gained from your loss. Thank you, Jamie. So listen to me. I got to go. I keep running over. I want to knock these things out in 30 minutes, but I'm now at 41 minutes, and all I can say is listen. I'm doing this Martin Ruof podcast, which the format's going to start shifting soon. It's a solo podcast. Eventually it's going to become a dual, whatever it is, live in person and higher production value. But for right now, I just want to build the community and I just want to share. And by the way, I'm doing something that scares me. It doesn't scare me so much anymore, but it scared the shit out of me at first. Like, watch the first 2 episodes, especially the first one. I was literally like scared out of my mind. But this is part of my healing process. So I'm doing it. And if you like what you're receiving from this, please share it. Please jump on YouTube and like the Martin Ruof podcast, subscribe, and let me know. Are there things that you would like to hear me talk about? Because I promise you, I'm going to start moving into other subjects, and I'm going to start talking about, some fiery subjects, and I'll talk about how to make a lot of money. I'll talk about how to earn millions of dollars. I'll talk about the mindset that you have to create not just richness, but riches, but wealth. I'll talk about how to keep your money instead of losing all your money. I'll talk about the things that are not just deep, dark, and heavy. I'll talk about the things that are light and fun and airy as well. But ultimately, this is about creating a community for people to create freedom, the freedom that they desire in their lives, freedom, liberty, to live the life of your freaking dreams. Because as you do that, then you help other people. You literally liberate other people to do the same thing. I worked in the restaurant industry for 20 years because the universe, God, was trying to tell me, you're here to be of service, Martin. I became an entrepreneur to be of service at a higher level. And now I'm doing this podcast, and I do coaching. I'm getting ready to launch a group coaching, but I do one-on-one coaching. If that's something you're interested in, great. You DM me, but I do these things to serve at a higher level. It's what I'm born to do. Clearly, it's what I'm born to do. So go do what you're born to do. And if you're not doing it yet, move towards it. Take a step. Do it. Do it tonight. Do it now. Do it today. Whenever you're watching this, do it. Take a small step. An inch is a cinch. Just do it. With that said, thank you for watching again. Please like and subscribe and share this. And I just so deeply appreciate you taking the time to watch this and to be on. Okay. Good night, everyone. Hey, by the way, I'm here next Tuesday night. I'm doing these live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central. I've been recording some of these podcasts, which I'll start dropping on YouTube as well. Not, again, not the live ones, but recorded as well. Okay. Thank you, everyone, so much. Have a great night. I wish you all the best, a great day, whatever it is. And we'll see you soon. Okay. Bye-bye.